Welcome back to the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. For a special YouTube exclusive, I'm Joshua Ray Milling. Follow me on Twitter at Josh_Ray_A. And also a little shameless self-plug here. If you love NFL content and occasional content about other sports, I do that on my own blog, Almost Always Football. The link is in my Twitter bio. And of course, follow the Transfer Portal on Twitter at TTransferPortal. We got so many handles, everybody. Let's try this again. Follow us on Twitter at TPortalCFB and at NoContextCFB. On Instagram, follow us at _NoContextCFB. On TikTok, NoContextCFB. And our new account at TransferPortalCFB. And check out our content on our website, of course, at thetransferportalcfb.com. On the self-plug, check out all my articles, of course, but especially the one titled Moments During the 2021 College Football Season That Led to Georgia's Title. All I'll say as a teaser is that we were this close to Notre Dame National Championship, and that's crazy to say, but we were. So on one of our latest podcasts, we had a Q&A session. The questions were submitted through Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, you can ask. I'm sure you can ask through the social medias that I plugged, and you can leave a YouTube comment, and we will gather them and get back to them eventually, because it's a long off season. There's a lot of stuff to cover, but it's fun to break it up with Q&A from our listeners. We love your input. We had great questions on that one. This was a question didn't make the cut. It was a little late getting in, but this is one that's related not just to college football, but all college athletics, and I just really love it. So shout out to my friend Micah. I really wanted to cover this one because I love sports, of course. I love college football, but I also love the inner workings of behind the scenes. Excuse me. One of my favorite podcasts actually is Nothing Personal with David Sampson. He was a former he was a front office guy with the Miami Marlins, and he talks about all the managerial upper management stuff, how owners deal with things. It's really cool to see and listen to. So this is kind of one of those questions along those lines. Micah asked, I just want an explanation for the whole thing about college players being allowed to get paid. Does everyone get it? Is it just jersey sales? Just a general overview would be nice, because it was a big deal just a few years ago, but now I don't know anything about it. Don't worry. Even after this entire video and all the research I put into it, I still don't know that much about it, realizing it. There's just a lot to go in, but I hope this video can help you at least get some kind of understanding, and that, after this, you can talk to your friends about NIL and other things in general about college athletes and payment, and you sound smarter, and you can thank me. So let's talk about that. So, how do college athletes get paid? So I want to start real quick. Shout out to Slides Carnival for the template I used. Excuse me again. They've been a super cool resource to use to kind of spice up things. If you use Google Slides, what's it called? PowerPoint. This is something you can use to have more options. And it's really nice. So, how did we get here? So there's a lot in the timeline that I could choose from, but I decided to pick these 8 points because I felt they were the most important. Of course, there are other very important moments, but if I covered every single one, we'd be here forever. So the first one is the term student athlete being invented in 1955. Walter Byers, the NCAA's first executive director, said in his book that they made up the term to avoid paying workers' comp. Yeah, we're off to a great start here. In September of 1955, Ray Dennison, an Army veteran who was playing football at Fort Lewis A&M, died after skull injuries he received during a football game. His widow sued, and Byers, along with his legal team, came up with the term student athlete. Byers said in his book, quote, college players were not students at play, which might understate their athletic obligations, nor were they just athletes in college, which might imply they were professionals. That they were high-performance athletes meant they could be forgiven for not meeting the academic standards of their peers. And listen closely on this next part. That they were students meant that they did not have to be compensated ever for anything more than the cost of their studies. Student athlete became the NCAA's signature term, repeated constantly in and out of courtrooms. Yeah, so there's that. To Byers' credit, after this book that he wrote, I believe this book came out in the 90s. Byers worked to turn this around and try and turn it around. He didn't like that this was something he was known for, and he tried to fix it. So shout out to him. Being an athlete in college isn't really a job, but it sure feels like one. I'm about to throw some numbers at you, and after that, you might see that you still might not think of it as a job, but players should probably be getting something more than they already are. So based on many sources that I could find, athletes are involved in this sport anywhere between 30 and 44 hours a week. There are, of course, 168 hours in a week. So let's say each athlete is awake for 17 hours a day, which means that they get a decent 7 hours of sleep, which to many of us who have gone to college sounds like a dream. And I just recently asked like some of my friends, like, hey, like how many hours, and this is again small sample size, but how many hours of sleep do you guys get? And none of them said that they get like a constant good amount of sleep. So yeah, I would assume that this 7 hours of sleep that I'm giving these athletes is a fair estimate, probably a little more than they usually get, but that's what we're going to go with. This would mean, doing some quick math, they would be awake 119 hours every week. So let's middle this and say each athlete spends 37 hours a week doing athletic stuff. That is 31.1% of the entire waking hours for the athlete that they spend on just their sport. That's almost a third of their time. The usual minimum number of college units a student has to take is 12 a semester. And I know some schools do trimesters and whatever, but 12 a semester. And it is advised that for each unit, students should spend 3 hours outside of class for each subject to at least pass the class. So that's about 48 hours a week, 12 in class and 36 out of class, which would be more or less depending on difficulty of a class, tutoring a student might have to take for the class, other outside things a student has to do for the class. So let's just keep it nice and easy at 48 hours a week. That would be about 40.3% of the 119 hours that a student is awake between class. So adding these two totals up, that is 71.4% of the time an athlete is awake is juggled between classes and being an athlete. And yes, I realize non-athletic students, you have jobs and everything, but they have jobs, but those jobs, they can get money. These athletes don't get the opportunity to make money, or didn't. Of course, I'm getting into that. Yeah, this is just doing this rough estimate that it was terrifying to see. So about what Byers said in his book, it's a bit infuriating, if you can't already tell from how I've been talking about it. So next on the timeline, skipping way ahead, is O'Bannon versus NCAA. VNCAA, excuse me, saying in the proper terms. This is one of the real big cases. There have been other cases, but this is the first one that really came into the map. This is a lawsuit led by former UCLA basketball player Ed O'Bannon with a bunch of other current and former student athletes. Pause for a water break real quick. Oh, man. So, let's see here. Where was I? So the lawsuit happened after O'Bannon. He saw a player in the EA Sports game NCAA Basketball 09, which I do have. I have the PS2 version, Kevin Love on the cover. I think that's what all the versions are. I think that's 09, or am I confusing? Whatever. But yeah, O'Bannon saw himself in that game. Well, he didn't technically see himself. There was a player on the 1995 UCLA championship winning team who looked like him, had the same jersey number, had the same height and weight, and the same left-handed shot. The player didn't have a name, of course, but it's O'Bannon. Why didn't the player have the name? Well, it's because if you don't have the names, you don't have to pay like the people for using their name, image, likeness, which right here, NIL, name, image, likeness. So what exactly did the lawsuit focus on? The lawsuit focused on unreasonable restraint of trade, which goes against the Sherman Act of 1890, which states that, quote, every contract, combination, or conspiracy in restraint of trade, end quote, is illegal. Another argument was that capping compensation at just covering the cost of attendance, so scholarship for tuitions, room and board compensation, and compensation for any required textbooks, and denying other compensation for the use of players' names, image, and likeness, NIL, in video games, live telecasts, rebroadcast of games, and any other stuff like that without permission from the athletes, current, former, whatever, was in violation of antitrust laws. But hold on a second. Don't athletes get full ride scholarships? So like they shouldn't worry about this? No, they don't. These aren't full ride, like everything's covered. As I mentioned before, scholarships cover tuition, room and board, and required textbooks, athletic scholarships. Anyone who's been a college student knows that even if they were given this type of scholarship, and it would be awesome to have all that covered, it's not enough to cover everything. And as a college student, that's a blow. And there's always another random cost, something happening, and it piles up. And this is super important, from the NCAA's website itself, quote, most student athletes who receive athletic scholarships receive an amount covering a portion of these costs. Many student athletes also benefit from academic scholarships, NCAA financial aid programs such as the NCAA Division I Student Athlete Opportunity Fund, and need-based aid such as federal Pell Grants. The quote continues, in most cases, coaches decide who receives the scholarship amount, and whether it be renewed. Let me read that again, the last part. In most cases, coaches decide who receives the scholarship amount, and whether it will be renewed. I believe this was changed, and I think scholarships have to be in for the entire time an athlete's there, unless like it can reasonably be taken away. I'm not sure though. But college coaches have a lot of power, and they can just yank a scholarship away whenever they want, pretty much. So again, I like to focus on most, not all. Most, not all. There's a lot of walk-on athletes who don't receive any athletic scholarships at all. And yeah, sometimes like there's a player who's really good, but the team just runs out of scholarships. So the coaches say, hey, sorry, come on, you can be with the team. We will give you a scholarship. But more often than not, the walk-on's just there just to help keep the team's overall GPA up. And they probably won't play that much. And others only receive partial scholarships. And Division III athletes get no athletic scholarships at all. And some sports either don't have scholarships in the first place, or they don't give full scholarships. I believe there's one school I saw where the football program gets athletic scholarships, but like the rowing team doesn't at all. So, yeah. And that leads to, aren't most sports besides football and men's basketball usually taking money away from athletic departments? No. Yes and no. Like there are graphics that float around showing football and men's basketball in the green, positive, but every other sport is in the red, negative. But that's because like money that comes in goes towards other things. And it's just the fact that football and men's basketball bring in so much money that even despite like the money brought in by all the sports being distributed elsewhere, football and men's basketball are able to stay in the green. And now more and more like I see some schools, women's college basketball is able to do this. Softball is able to do this. Yeah, for the most part, it's football and men's basketball. So those are considered revenue sports, and all the other sports are non-revenue sports. But it could easily, and I want to emphasize easily, be covered by football alone, where athletic departments aren't really in debt. Because where does the money go? The money goes to, well, number one, luxurious facilities that athletes are barely able to take advantage of. Go back and look at my rough math. Yeah, like and a lot of things like Oregon, they have like awesome facilities all the time, LSU. But a lot of times you hear like from athletes and people who like work in the industry and everything, they say like athletes don't get to spend that much time there. They don't get to use the cool like mini golf courses, the barber shops, the well, barbershops as they were like intended to be like a cool hangout place, but no, they're just in there for a quick haircut. Um, there's all kinds of things there that players don't really get to use that much. Um, so it looks cool and it's awesome for bringing players onto campus, but once they get there, they're like, oh no, I'm never going to use that place ever again. Speaking of bringing players onto campus, recruiting. Recruiting is a humongous industry, and yes, it is an industry. And whether it's transporting scouts and coaches to see recruits all over the place, hosting camps for potential recruits, bring recruits in. There's certain parts that schools can and cannot pay for bringing a recruit on campus, but yeah, you have to pay for that, and then the entire scouting department. It's a lot of money put into that, which it's necessary, but again, like some of this stuff, you look at the money spent, it's like, really? I don't know. And then finally the coaches make a lot of money. College coaches let me rephrase it. Head college football coaches are regularly the highest paid employees in their state. There's an article I saw, I think it's when O'Bannon v. NCAA came out, it was like a click on the map and see who's the highest paid employee, and like all but like one were head football coaches. And some schools are private schools, so they don't release the salary amount. But for example, legendary head coach of Duke men's college basketball, Mike Krzyzewski, they're a private school, so they don't release the funds. But if you ask anyone who's in the know, they say, yeah, Krzyzewski is the highest paid coach. He's the guy. So yeah, a lot of money goes to them, head coaches, not just the head coaches, assistant coaches now. The salaries they're making at a lot of these programs, if you look 10, even 5 years ago, they're making head coach money. So think about it. That money could instead be taken and spread across the athletes. And man, people wonder why many air quote non-revenue sports and Olympic sports are cut every year. They're not cut because there's not money available. There is money available. It's just the money goes to places where, like, it on the surface, it sounds cool. Like the facilities looks cool, the recruiting looks cool. Coaches, of course, you want to pay the coaches, but I mean, some of that money could be spread out a little better. So to continue with O'Bannon versus VNCAA, District Court Judge Claudia Wilkin ruled in favor of O'Bannon, which was awesome. You see, she ordered full cost of attendance scholarships plus cost of living attendance covered, and the ability for athletes to gain $5,000 off their name, image like this, NIL. This amount was then later vacated when the NCAA appealed up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but the higher court did keep the rest of the stuff. So this stuff was kept, this stuff was kept, this stuff not kept, unfortunately. And so the Supreme Court denied hearing petitions from both sides to hear it continue, so the case just stopped right there. But this was a good step, and it did also help to lead to a cost of attendance rule that gave athletes between $2,000 and $4,000 each year to help cover for miscellaneous expenses. After a study done came up with that monetary amount, it was just some so on average, this is how much this miscellaneous stuff. So that's what players got, which is cool. But not enough. Next, we got California legislation being passed. This is really cool to see. Starting January 1st, 2023, athletes could start making money from endorsements without punishment. So Governor Gavin Newsom said on Twitter, quote, colleges reap billions, yes, it is billions, from student athletes, but block them from earning a single dollar. And in response to that, about a month later, the NCAA Board of Governors decided, we got to change fast. So they told all three divisions, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, to have rules in place to allow for athletes the ability to make NIL endorsement money starting in January of 2021. And they said the rules had to be transparent, focused, and enforceable. whatever that means. And they did emphasize keeping the collegiate model in place, aka don't pay the players from the wallets of the schools or anything else. Just keep it NIL. But then 2020 happened, specifically the summer. A lot of stuff happened. I had so much to choose from, but I picked these three. So on June 12th, Florida passed legislation much like California's, except it was going to start July 1st, well before California's date of 2023, and much closer to the NCAA's January 2021 date. July 22nd, NCAA President Mark Emmert went and asked for federal help to have rules put in place and also to get an antitrust exemption placed on the NCAA to avoid further lawsuits so the NCAA could keep doing what they're doing. Members of the Senate basically told him, no, make your own rules. And as one senator said, quote, I would suggest that you should up your game here on all these other protections if you're even thinking about that kind of immunity, end quote. I mean, just told him, kicked them out and told him, figure it out yourself. And then August 2nd, a group of Pac-12 players threatened to boycott the season under the hashtag #WeAreUnited. Among their list of requests to not boycott, they asked for a share of athletic department revenue. Other players nationally gave support, but it ended up fizzling out and there was no real boycotts that happened. However, it did show that players were willing to consider holding out, and that's a strong thing to do. Like holding out, you could potentially lose your scholarship and all your spot on the team. So that's huge. And players are becoming more and more willing to speak up for themselves, which is awesome to see. Then there was a snag. January 11, the end of 2021, the NCAA delayed NIL voting because a letter came in from the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division. And the letter stated that any rule changes could make the situation cloudier and harder to put any type of official ruling on it. So the NCAA panicked and said, no, we're going to wait on this. And they also delayed loosening transfer portal rules or transfer rules. Eventually, these rules were created and they were put into effect on April 2021. And I'll touch on these transfer rules a bit later. They do, in part, come into NIL. Then finally came June 20, 2021, when the NCAA v. Alston ruling came down. So, former West Virginia fullback Sean Alston led the charge in a case that began as Alston v. NCAA. And in 2019, Judge Claudia Wilkin once again ruled in it, and she ruled in favor of the athletes for the most part. She did not allow for all the things that were being asked for from the athletes. One of these was to get rid of all compensation limits on things such as the size of athletic scholarships and cash awards, anything not related to academics. She denied this. Another part was that the NCAA was encouraged by Wilkin to let individual conferences make their own strict rulings on compensation. So the problem had been that the NCAA and these conferences were like all separate groups, but they were all working together to pretty much fix prices in one spot and add in other restrictions. That violates antitrust laws against cartels. Yeah, that's right. The NCAA acting this way, it's a cartel, which is, it's pretty shocking when you put it that way, when you think about it that way. But it's not too shocking considering everything I've laid out. So both the NCAA and the athletes appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals again. The NCAA said their reasoning was that the ruling by Judge Wilkin weakened education-based compensation limits. The athletes, from what I already laid out, that's why they appealed. And the Ninth Circuit Court upheld the ruling. So the students were like, you know what? We'll settle here. We'll fine here. Well, not that they're fine, but we'll take what we can get. And the NCAA said, nah, we're going all the way up. So went up to the Supreme Court and it switched. Now it was NCAA v. Alston. So went up all the way to the Supreme Court, and this was awesome to see. Simple-minded me. Like to see a nice, simple scoreboard, So 9-0 vote. The NCAA lost. That was so awesome. That's something cool to see on social media. All the people just dunking on the NCAA for just losing that badly. So, just something of note, how this result differs from O'Bannon v. NCAA is that while that case focused on cost of attendance and NIL specific stuff, Alston v. NCAA focused on allowing unlimited compensation related to education. So, for example, things such as postgrad scholarships, academic awards, paid internships offered through the school, study abroad education, and whatever else were now required. And this was awesome. Other things to keep an eye on from this were that from everything that occurred and like how like things were written and how like the court was handling it, it appears that further lawsuits related to this that might and will probably be coming, such as like the previously mentioned stuff on compensation outside of athletics, pay for play, would most likely be ruled in favor of athletes based on the language used by the court. And another is that the NCAA rules aren't law. What I mean by that is for the longest time, it was seen this way. The NCAA acted as such where this is the rule, that's it. But the NCAA is of course below the government. So the government's laws are above the NCAA's rules. And the NCAA like basically was told off by the court that your reckoning is coming. So figure this out. However, the court did mention that if/when pay for play happens, there will be a lot of work that will have to be done both legally and logistically. But I mean, personally, that sounds like a good problem to have rather than a real negative. Finally, we all got to this point. July 1st, 2021, NIL activity became legal. And it just saw us and see a bunch of athletes being able to sign deals and stuff. Across all divisions, it was legalized because the NCAA looked at the situation, getting smoked 9-0, seeing that all these NIL deals were going to be allowed anyways by states, because again, the government is over the NCAA. So the NCAA said, forget it, just let's go. And NIL is legal. Have at it. Of note, the NAIA had been able to take advantage of NIL endorsements since October 6th of 2020, in part because they are kind of more organized than the NCAA and they have less schools, so it's less people to work with, which does help. So, but if they're able to do that, the NCAA had to wait that long. So with all of that established, finally on to the questions. Question 1. Does everyone get money? Yes. Every college athlete has the ability to make money. Here from the NCAA, quote, governance bodies in all 3 divisions today, June 30, 2021, adopted a uniform interim policy suspending NCAA name, image, and likeness rules for all incoming and current student athletes in all sports. And then, like I said, NAIA athletes can also make money. If you're wondering, NAIA schools are about equivalent to D2, smaller D school, and then D3 schools in terms of size. But how can they make money? Is it just jersey sales? No. Because if the players did that, that would be from making money from the school. And that's illegal because the schools cannot pay the players because they're not employees. Number 1, because that's, again, illegal. And number 2, the schools don't, and the NCAA don't want to have their athletes as employees. So they don't want to do that. So how do they get paid? It's third-party deals, sponsorships. So you know how like on a podcast or a YouTube video, they have ad reads for sponsors, or like a social media influencer will be like #ad on a post, or they will tag a brand in their post. That's the main way college athletes get paid using NIL. This is awesome because like players finally get to make money, but it's not cool because schools are off the hook for now and get to keep their money for themselves. But no, it's a good place from where we were. There are some technically like jersey sales happening where athletes get to cut up money, but these are special cases. So back in July of 2021, the MDEN, as their website says, is the quote, the official merchandise retailer of Michigan Athletics, end quote, signed contracts with football players to sell jerseys with names and numbers on them. However, this is only for football, and it's not through the university, and it has to be custom orders. The MDen is doing it by themselves, acting as a third party. Officially licensed products aren't allowed. So like the MDen couldn't churn out a bunch of jerseys of like Aiden Hutchinson. They're like awesome defensive end. They can't just churn out a bunch of jerseys with 97 Hutchinson on them. They have to do it like one at a time, special order. I mean, it is what it is. From what I could find at this point, only Michigan football players can make money like this. But, you know, it's pretty cool. Players get a cut. And it's also kind of funny because Ohio State, Michigan's rival, is doing a similar thing, except the university is working with retailers if players have joined an official group licensing program that acts as the paying third party. However, the university does not work with the athletes directly, and the university can disapprove of any like trademarks like logos and stuff like that. So these are just some examples how players can make money off jerseys, but it's not like the typical like how a pro athlete gets a cut when his jerseys is sold. But you know, it's a start. Other ways are interesting there. Players can sell their own merchandise so long as it is not incorporated with the school. So like an athlete can sell like something with like one of his logos, like a logo that they make or something. But as long as it has nothing to do with the school. It can be school colors, but can't have like the logo on it. They can host their own camps and where participants pay a fee. And you can do other stuff like Cameo. And there are some cases where a podcast or like a YouTube channel or something has paid for exclusive rights to interview players. So the players like only do interviews with them, but they get paid. So, I mean, some people like we're all up in arms about that, but players get paid. If you're willing to pay for exclusive rights, go ahead. Oh, by all means. So how do athletes get money? I already said that and stated that, and it seems all set, right? No, there's a kind of something I brushed by. Maybe you caught it, maybe you didn't. These NIL rules that we're talking about, not even close to being finished because the current rules are temporary. You might be asking what? Yeah, these are temporary rules. The NCAA probably like feeling the pressure and not thinking that they'd lose to the court in the courts, and they wouldn't lose that badly. They seem to be lacking any real plan. Probably had something in place, but I don't think they really had something in place because they basically said July 1st, a bunch of states are making stuff legal. So, all right, you guys got it. And they just kind of threw up their hands and walked away. And they are working to figure out rules sometime. Eventually, I haven't heard much. So, yeah, we'll see where that goes. But for now, these temporary rules are the rules in place. But the problem is there are no real rules in place. The only clear rule is that schools cannot pay athletes. But what counts as a legal payment? Like, it's clear like a check from an endorsement deal is like, that's legal, of course. But can an athlete get a car? Can they get like food? Is a house a legal payment? I mean, maybe. No one knows. And then school rules for the athletes are not really being followed or enforced. Some schools don't, like I said, with like Ohio State as an example, and other schools, they don't allow for their logos to be seen in advertisements with their athletes. But there are many examples of athletes filming on campus with a logo in the background, or they're wearing like a t-shirt or something that like has their school's logo on it. Yet the NCAA isn't really monitoring the situation, and the school's compliance offices are the ones who are supposed to report and keep track of this. But what school is honestly going to tell them themselves? Like, really? And if they did tell them themselves for some reason, what would the NCAA do? Could they do anything? Do they care? Of course they care, but could they really do anything? No one knows. Yeah. And besides the NCAA, it's confusing with the states. Again, the NCAA's rules are the baseline. They're the ground zero. different states have different rules, of course. For example, depending on the state, people associated with the school can or cannot talk with sponsors. All right, seems fine enough. But some state players can't sign NIL deals until after the endorsement. And that's kind of tricky because can a school say, because the school can't work with NIL, but can like a company say, hey, we will give you this money, but you got to go to this school? Is that illegal tampering? Is that illegal recruiting? No one knows. No, I just keep laughing because the more, even after I've researched this stuff over and over, it's just ridiculous. Can players have agents? No one knows. For football, the NFL Players Association is allowing agents of NFL players to represent college players. From what I could find, I have no idea if this is allowed by the NCAA or the states. I couldn't find anything. Looked at YouTube, Google, Bing, social media. I couldn't find anything. So, yeah. And then finally, some states are in it from the jump, like NIL, let's go, and others are taking the time. That might be confusing because you might be saying, wait, isn't NIL just legal everywhere because of the NCAA's ruling? Yes. The NCAA rules made it so that NIL is legal everywhere. But depending on the state, the rules can differ from the NCAA's baseline rules. These two examples I'm going to be giving another example are good examples of differences, but it's something that a lot of people were concerned about at the beginning because they were saying this state is allowing for NIL, but this state is not allowing for NIL. So can a player still get NIL because the NCAA said so? Because remember, like I said, the government laws supersede NCAA rules. I mean, for now, everyone, it appears that the states don't really care, but we'll see. But the example of Georgia and Alabama, these are from the deep South, where athletics, and especially football, rules everything. These decisions are being made in the interest of bettering the schools because everyone is either A, a fan, or B, they know how to get the favor of voters on their side. So in May of 2021, Georgia's governor, Brian Kemp, a graduate of the University of Georgia and a big-time fan of the program, signed a bill to make NIL legal. Where did he happen to do this? At the state capitol? His house? Somewhere else? No. He signed it in the Georgia Football Recruiting Lounge overlooking the field. And that wasn't a coincidence. Listen to this series of quotes. He said, "I can't think of a better venue than this one to really do something like this. If I was a 5-star recruit, I personally wouldn't want to be anywhere but Athens, Georgia. I believe it sets Georgia to accomplish something that quite honestly should have been done a long time ago. I'm a little biased, but I believe this is going to give Coach Kirby Smart every bit of help he needs to bring home a national championship. Who knows what's going to happen at that federal level? They just can't seem to get anything done and agree on anything. That's one reason we took the step. It's going to be interesting to see what the NCAA does and also what the conferences do down the road. You can't afford not to be competing with other states just because of the dynamics of the game and the economics of it today." End quote. I mean, I highlighted these parts because it's obvious why he signed this deal. Focusing on football, of course, but for all Georgia athletics, and I mean Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, those other colleges and universities are going, hey, I mean, it helps us too, so thank you. It's for the athletics. And for the reigning national champion, Georgia Bulldogs, things just got a little easier for them to help bring in athletes and keep athletes there. A weird note about this bill, though, is that schools can take 74.99% of athletic earnings and hold it in escrow and only give it 1 year after an athlete leaves school slash graduates the school. If you don't know what escrow means, it means that money is taken away from a third party and it's stored away for later. And this isn't it's not like a savings account or anything. It's just simply stored away. It doesn't gain any interest. So, I mean, cool, I guess, but I don't know. That seemed kind of weird to me. And in the past few days, Alabama, home of the absolute dynasty that is Alabama football, is about to repeal previous NIL legislation they had passed. But it's not for why you might be thinking. Representative Kyle South said that the reason for the repeal was that the NCAA's NIL rules were less restrictive than Alabama's. and this is a problem because, quote, this just makes me laugh. Oh man, okay, quote, there tends to be a thought process that Texas and Michigan have had an advantage in the fall. Going into this upcoming recruiting season, we just didn't want any conflict to be there, end quote. If you're not familiar, the two states he mentioned, Texas and Michigan, contain several big-time college football programs and just big-time athletic programs in general. And just focusing on football, all of them are taking everything in their power to take down Alabama. So Representative South here said that, yeah, we don't want to see our Crimson Tide lose. This is hilarious. This is stuff that can only happen in college athletics. This is awesome. Man, as the NCAA says, as the SEC in conference where Georgia and Alabama are, as the SEC likes to say, it just means more. And this next example is pretty cool. This is outside of the government, but it still shows how strong athletics is in the South. Another example is Grambling State, an HBCU located in Louisiana. They're partnering with two companies to set up NIL deals with athletes that will act as an annual income versus a lump sum of money that usually comes with an NIL deal. So like you'd sign like the contract and you're like, boom, here's your money. This is just an income. It's pretty cool. Like as Pete Thamel said, the deal is believed to be the first of its kind, and I tried to look up other examples, and I think this is the first one. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see an HBCU get on top of that. That was pretty awesome. Something to look at, though, is how companies, the ones giving the money right now, how they react. It's trends versus stability. An example of the trend is Jerry Casey. So Jerry Casey is walk-on at the University of Kansas. So again, walk-on, not getting a scholarship. Kansas football did awful. They had one good year in 2008, and besides that, they've been awful. But they went into Texas, and they beat Texas, giant powerhouse program. Jared Casey caught the game-winning 2-point conversion in overtime. It was awesome to see. There was like a cool angle of his parents seeing him score, and they're cheering, and all around them, all the sad Texas fans. It was awesome. But yeah, jumping on the trend, I think the Monday after, a local Applebee's and an automotive dealership signed him to NIL deals. So that was awesome to see for the walk-on in Casey. And a bigger example of jumping on trends right away was as soon as NIL became legal, the Cavender twins, Haley and Hannah, absolute studs on the Fresno State women's basketball team, and they're also extremely popular on social media. They announced deals with Boost Mobile and other companies. Again, the very day NIL became legal. So that's getting on it right away. This is that. Shout out to them being in Times Square. Boost Mobile stuff. That was super cool to see. They're really good. And yeah, it was Boost Mobile signing with them right away. That's not only just the Boost, the Cavender's presence, but also to, no pun intended, Boost Mobile's presence, because I would contend that the Cavender twins are more popular than Boost Mobile. Contrast these deals, however, getting these deals right away, with the deals that Paige Beckers and Shadir Sanders signed with Gatorade. No offense to Applebee's and Boost Mobile and whatever other brands, but Gatorade is easily a more recognizable and bigger brand, especially in athletics. So Beckers, transcendent star playing for the UConn women's basketball team, she was the first college athlete ever to sign with Gatorade on November 29, 2021. Sanders, talented quarterback at Jackson State University, or his dad, Deion Sanders, coaches. Shadir signed on January 27th. Looking at it, these are 4 and 6 months later than the Cavender Twins deal with Boost Mobile, respectively. So yeah, it was interesting to see that Gatorade waited a little bit before jumping into the game. Yeah, when NIL when NIL was made legal back in July of 2021, most companies had already set their yearly budgets. But with the new fiscal year in swing, fiscal year starts October 1st, and a decent sample size of NIL deals already out, and like companies can do their research and see what works, what doesn't. I would expect to see a lot more big companies signing athletes in the coming months, years, so on and so forth as we go along. So expect a lot more Gatorade deals, Nike deals, Adidas, all that stuff. There is a kind of a problem that hasn't really been talked about with NIL, and it's that it's kind of a salary cap situation. So if you're not familiar with the term concept of salary cap in professional sports, there's a salary cap. So like teams can't just like, if there's like a super rich team, they can't just like pay for all the good players. There's like there's a cap. The thing is with this situation, too much NIL money or just too much income in general means that athletes can lose Pell Grants and other financial aid and whatever. And like anyone who has gone through the process know that people look at financial aid and like award financial aid based on pretty much like the income of not just like the individual, but like the family where the athlete comes from or where the person comes from. So if a player loses their financial aid, it's basically a wash, so that they could have gotten the same amount of financial help, or they might have been better off just taking the financial aid. I haven't found a concrete example of this, but I know this is bound to be happening, and this is a real fear in this Wild West where not everyone is receiving the same financial advice as others. This is a reminder that many athletes, and it is many because it's not talked about much, but it is many athletes, when they get any kind of money they can, that's not just like financial aid that like goes to a specific thing, they send the money back home where like their families really need the help. So a loss of financial aid like this means like the athletes are just stuck in like, oh, I have this NIL, which is really cool, but I just lost my financial aid. I'm basically just stuck at zero again. And taxes. NIL stuff is an income. It's taxable. How many people really know how to do their taxes? Like, if you honestly know how to do your taxes, tell me, help me. I would really appreciate it. Hit me up in the comment section. So, got it? Does that all make sense? With NIL and the history of NIL? If you don't, go ahead and watch this video back. It'd be awesome for the algorithm. Speaking of algorithm, make sure to like and subscribe. Help us out. Bump this up. If you don't understand this, that's fine. There's so many moving pieces that even as I was making this outline, working on this video, I had to keep adjusting because so much stuff came out, so much new stuff that I found. I had to adjust for things. It's changing all the time. In fact, today there was more NIL news that came out, and I just didn't add it in because it's basically what I've been saying in these videos, but more stuff comes out every day. So keep an eye on it. So what will change and what won't change in this situation moving forward? Why won't this change first? Oh, excuse me. Congress has more pressing things to worry about in their eyes, and any lawmakers in general don't really know what's going on, and they're not paying attention. Like, they're too disconnected from the situation to really do anything. As you can see with some of their comments and questions that they had, if you go find like the full case of Alston v. NCAA, some of the questions being asked were they didn't really they just weren't it. They just didn't make sense. Another thing with NIL legislation and proposals from states and from the federal level, they emphasize that athletes aren't employees. The NCAA is still lobbying very hard, and they are keeping the government for now from making it that they have to pay. Despite the bipartisan agreement, the 9-0 vote in the Supreme Court, that's
pretty rare. There are still, of course, different views. Republicans basically say, let the market decide. NIL, let whoever wants to pay these athletes pay them. Democrats saying, open it up. Give them the salaries. Give them salaries. So we'll see how it goes. Why will this change, though? As mentioned earlier, any more court rulings, like as the Supreme Court said, all the courts said that will probably lean towards the athletes. And if anything, the courts are saying that they are more than ready to listen, and they probably want to force the NCAA from to stop them from doing all this antitrust stuff. And then the transfer portal. The transfer portal is where like an athlete at school A can like enter the transfer portal, so he can talk to school B, C, D legally. Like, hey, can I transfer here? Yada yada yada. The transfer portal is a lot easier to enter because one of the more recent rules in place is that all athletes can transfer one time without having to sit out for a year. The previous rule was if you transfer, you had to get a special waiver to immediately play the following season. And it was very hit or miss for whether or not an athlete would get a waiver or not. So it's really nice to see that athletes can just transfer. And some people think, oh man, why can athletes do that? They're just quitting. I will give you an example of a coach quitting. Many coaches quit, or it's not quit, it's bettering their situation. For example, very recently, Kevin Steele was about to become the University of Maryland's defensive coordinator on Friday, January 28th. And his office was ready. It's like there's like a popular picture floating around on social media that, look, here's his office with his nameplate on it. He's ready to go. 3 days later, Kevin Steele bounced to the University of Miami for the same position. This also brings up another example of the University of Miami that I just thought of. Manny Diaz, I don't remember where he was, but he was going to be I think he was like the defensive coordinator or something at the University of Miami. Apologies for me messing up these facts, but he went to the University of Temple to be the head coach, signed, started to go build up this program. 3 weeks later, he left to go take the head coaching job at Miami. Again, like he had just been at Miami, so like kind of makes sense that yeah, he'd rather want to stay there, and Miami is a better job than Temple. But like, look at what coaches can do, and people are getting on players for transferring. It doesn't make sense to me. Coaches are hypocritical, and they don't like how players can just easily transfer out of a program. But if they want to fix this, and if players get paid, if a player has to sign a contract with a school, a paying contract, number one, they couldn't easily just leave because that would break the contract, and that makes coaches happy. And two, players would probably be more willing to stay with the school because they're getting paid. Like, sure, whatever. Yeah, like even if they're not getting playing time right away, like I'm still getting a paycheck. That's pretty good. And I have to again reiterate, these rules aren't permanent. They're going to be changing and adjusted to fit the landscape, not just by the NCAA, but by states. There's a lot of legislation by states coming into effect this year, some next year. Some states are, again, figuring it out as they go. And these rules will differ from other states, and they will very much differ from the NCAA's. And finally, the NCAA is reeling, and they know they're losing. So it's either strap up and fight back, or give the athletes what they deserve and let them get paid. So what's the lesson? What's the takeaway? So the NCAA is more and more useless, seemingly more and more useless each and every day. The media and the athletes are speaking out more and more against how the NCAA has handled this entire situation of athletes getting compensation. And the government is keeping an eye on the situation. For now, we have NIL, though, which is wonderful to see and much needed towards getting college athletes proper compensation. But what will this look like in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Will the NCAA be around in its current form? I honestly doubt it. Will college sports be around in this form? Will sports, how it's set up, be around in this form, where there's a college and professional level separated? Probably not. Because the Americas, like Canada and the United States,
are like some of the only places I know that where this happens. Like Europe, there's like club athletics, and then they feed right into the pros. So will that be happening? It might be. Who knows? It will be interesting to see. But for now, NIL again is really good to see, and it's moving towards proper compensation. We'll see how it goes. My throat is dying. I'll let you all in on how I shot this. I shot part 1, the second part, which I can't believe was 50 something minutes long of me just talking straight, and then the third part. And the third part I've had to do over and over because my throat just keeps like giving out. So I'm gonna try and finish this real quick. Let's see, where am I? I'm Joshua Hamley. Thanks for watching this YouTube exclusive of the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. Again, please leave a like, a comment. It really helps us out in the algorithm. And like watch and don't just and watch is like replay this over and over if you need to. Play it in the background, that helps. Share it with people also. Like literally like sharing the link and like in the description where it says like you can share. Doing that really helps in the algorithm also. Let's getting this out there, pushing this up for more people to see. It'll help my ego, but also like it'll help the channel. That'd be super awesome. And just word of mouth too. That's really helped us like bring on more people, spread this out. It's been really awesome. It's really fun to be a part of this. So yeah, and just we're all loving this and doing this, and so support us. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on the bell notification. We're getting more and more doing live stream stuff. It'll be fun to see more interaction from people. We had pretty good interaction so far already, but seeing more would be awesome. So turn on the bell so you can get those live streams, and as soon as we upload videos, you can get those right into your feed. And yeah, I will see you next time with another long rambling solo video. See you next time.